We light a candle for the Tao, which teaches that the Tao is the way that pervades all, reflected as balance, the yin-yang that makes up wholeness. We light a candle for the shamanic traditions, which teaches that everything is living and infused with life force energy. We light a candle for Hinduism, which teaches that there is one supreme reality manifest in many incarnations. We light a candle for Judaism, which teaches one God, one creator of the universe with whom all can have a personal relationship. We light a candle for all forms of Buddhism, which teaches that nothing is permanent and that there are as many understandings of God as there are people, including no God. We light a candle for all forms of Christianity, which teaches one God expressed as a trinity of Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. We light a candle for all forms of Islam, which teaches that there is one God, Allah, as the one true reality and source of all creation. We light a candle for the universalistic religion of Baha'i, which teaches that there is one God who has been revealed progressively through the world's religions and spiritual traditions over the course of time. We light a candle for all forms of New Thought, which teaches that God is consciousness, infinite intelligence, omnipotence, omnipresence, and omniscience. Sorry. There is no thing that is not God. We light a candle for all those who are as yet unaware of the power and presence of spirit in their lives, and for the space that we're holding for them, and for all faith traditions unnamed in this ceremony. This final candle is the healing candle. It represents the revealing of the divinity at the core of all experiences. This is your candle for whatever is in your mind and heart that requires the light.
Thank you, Lorraine. Thanks, Mom. This candle here, if you're new to our community, you may not know this, but this candle here is the peace candle. And we opt to keep the peace candle always illuminated as a reflection of the consistent and ever-present illumination of peace within each and every one of us. And as we allow our inner peace to inform every aspect of our lives, every thought, every relationship, every belief, every interaction, every circumstance, then right where we are creating a more peaceful world. And that extends out and extends out and extends out. And so we are the seed for world peace. Have you ever had an experience, just question, this is a rhetorical question. And the truth is, we've all had experiences. Yes, that is true. Fundamental truth. We're having an experience right now. I'm having an experience right now. How about you? Oh, yeah. So now this is the rhetorical question. Have you ever had an experience where you've had a vision, right? Or a plan, or a desire to do your best, and you've watched it all go sideways? I see that the rhetorical question was met with answers, and so I think I'm on the right track here. Well, what do? Well, that's fundamentally true. You release it. You release your attachment to the outcome, right? And there are ways that we can do this. So really, Our responsibility is to identify and understand our relationship to the circumstances of our life. And we get to then determine what that relationship is, and that is how we then get to fundamentally shift the experience of our life, not because we're manipulating those circumstances, but because we are changing our conscious relationship to them. And so it's really about changing from a consciousness of reactivity to a consciousness of responsibility. We have a capacity to respond, and that is what I refer to as our responsibility. When I use the word responsibility, I am never intending to have it be defined as blame. Blame keeps us rooted in past paradigms, and so responsibility is a forward-looking idea that says, what is possible from this moment moving forward? And so it's not about having something go sideways in your life and say, well, how am I going to make my life obey what I want it to be? Actually, what it has come up for me to be is this. Ask this question as my responsibility. How do I stay in the flow? How do I stay in the flow of an infinite life, power, and presence that is rooted in flowing forth as the expression and wholeness that we call love without getting derailed in my own mind? Because that's the only place I can ever be derailed, is in my own mind. And that derailment is what leads to reactivity. Sometimes the holiest moments in life are when this comes up in relationship to what's happening. Well, that's not what I expected. That's not what I expected. And there are familiar experiences that are kind of outlined in Jesse's beautiful song, you know, the feeling of being stuck. Well, that's not what I expected, right? The return of old shadows is an idea that comes up in the song. The need to let go. And what do? We allow ourselves to go into that space of knowing something better, to trust that the inner spirit knows beyond what we may perceive to be a limited understanding. I'm going to talk about paradox once again because paradox seems to be pretty prevalent for me these days. We've been talking a lot about paradox in the prayer class on Tuesday nights, but again, a paradox is when two seemingly different ideas are both true at the same time. And so the primary paradox within the New Thought spiritual philosophy is that God, this infinite power and presence, is just that. It is transcendent. It is infinite, right? And it is also immanent. It is transcendent and it is immanent. It is who we are, the absolute basis of our beingness. Every fiber of our being is God. And so we perceive it personally as our personal identity, but it is also the infinite identity. And so those two things are true at the same time. And that becomes a challenge because when we adopt the idea that we are this divine presence and power as we are expressing it, we sometimes limit God to our limited understanding. And what I'm always seeking to do in my path is to break beyond what I think I know, to open up to the infinite potential and possibility to live within the question of, I don't know what I don't know. Now, what can I know? What is possible for me in the experience and expression of my life that is not limited to anything, because all the limitation comes from ideas of the past. And when I am stuck, rooted in the past, I am not in the flow. I'm not in the flow. So our personality is often the reactive aspect of our being, our personality. Now, I want to define personality for just a moment after I have a sip of water. So I have a particular way that I approach my understanding of personality. Personality is our outward expression, right? He's got such personality, we can say. I've got a lot of personality. I don't know if you know that about me. But our personality is our outward expression of our innate inner identity. The identity is that inside aspect. And our personality is how our identity expresses outwardly. It is how we navigate life. There's another word that often comes up in relationship to this idea, and that is ego. And we've given ego a very bad rap, right? Because, we can look at someone and we might say something along the lines of, well, he has quite an inflated ego, which is akin to saying his personality is so beyond what I'm comfortable with that I have to comment on it. Ego gets a bad rap. And, in this philosophy, we refer to the ego as an acronym saying we're edging God out, right? You ever hear that? Like in this room, I'm sure you've all heard that. But, if you really go back to the root of that word, ego, it essentially means I am. That's what the word means. And so what if we redefine the ego in this way? Entertaining God only. Not from the point of view of setting ourselves apart, but understanding that if God is the only thing that exists, then everything is on equal footing. If I entertain God only as my identity and accept it as the identity of every single aspect of creation that I encounter, then we are all living life as one unified wholeness. Well, that to me is what unity is all about. Not to say, we struggle with this idea of arrogance and humility, right? Nobody wants to come across as being too arrogant. But I also would suggest that we redefine the notion of humility and we find middle ground between the two. Because for me, to be humble is not to be groveling, lowly. It is to understand my identity as the same identity of every single person I encounter. And from that point of view, there is an aspect of arrogance, which means to be the owner of all that I experience, the owner of all that I experience. I am owning my identity, not in a boastful way, but in a way that says, I know who I am. I trust and know this to be true of every single person I encounter. And again, it puts us on equal footing, and we get to live in the flow. This takes an inner shift. It takes redefining what we think we know. And so what is that shift, really? That shift for me is really inviting personality to release the control that it thinks it has. I do this in the prayer class all the time. If we are letting our personality control everything we think we have, then we're probably living life like this. Right? Oh, I got to control everything. I got to control all the circumstances. I got to control all the experiences because it's the only way that I'm going to feel comfortable. Let it go. Let it go. Live in the flow. Allow the inner spirit to be expressed and to expand. Personality will say in any given circumstance that may have gone sideways, well, this was the plan that fell through. Inner spirit says, irrespective of the plan, I am always on the path. Flow does not ask us to destroy personality. It asks us to redefine personality, to let personality be the vehicle, but not the driver. Because the driver is our innate sense of being. Our driver is cause, infinite cause. If we think about life in terms of a law of cause and effect, everything that we experience in life is the effect. And there is a cause to that effect. That cause, what we teach in New Thought, is that cause is entirely in our use of this infinite consciousness. It is in our mind. Everything that is showing up is the result of our thoughts, our beliefs, and our feelings. And so the drivers in our life are cause. Rooting through this law and showing up as perfect effect. What that does for us sometimes is it challenges us to think that everything has to be in place for something new to unfold and express. Excuse me. You ever hear yourself say, well, I will make these shifts in my life when I'm ready? We are culturalized into this idea that we need to wait until we're ready for something to change in our lives. We will never be ready. We will never be ready because ready isn't a feeling. Ready is a decision. Ready is a decision. You decide you're ready, even if it scares the out of you. Readiness is the moment we choose alignment over hesitation, knowing that something better does exist, and I am ready now. I'm making the decision to be ready to step into it. I have had a couple experiences in my life where I didn't know that I was ready, but I made a decision to be ready. One of those times was when I was finishing up my ministerial studies. I've probably told this story before. You know, ministers, I've been doing this for 15 years. We tell the same stories sometimes, so apologize for that. But I was on the precipice. I was like finishing my ministerial studies. I went through my path of study. We had our intensive week. It's like the final week, and you go through your final panel when you're being grilled by ordained ministers, and they're asking you all the questions to make sure that you have the consciousness of ministry and you're ready to go, right? Because they're going to sign a paper that says you are qualified. And the way that it happened in my path is we didn't get that piece of paper until the day after our panel. We were not told in the moment. That's changed a little bit now, gratefully. Because you sit there for like 24 hours like, did I pass? Did I not? Has the last 6 years been for naught? I don't know. Like, what if they say no? What am I going to do? You start to spin out, right? You start to tell all those stories because in the absence of information, we make up stories about what's going to happen. All right, so what happened is I was with my cohort, 9 other students that we had all gone through the ministerial training program together, and we were up in Central California in Monterey, and we were at a hotel, and that's where the intensive panel was. And we all were handed the sealed envelopes, and we said, we're all going to go to our friend's room, and we're all going to open them at the same time, 9 of us. And so we got there, and we opened it up, and looked at it, and we all passed. Whew. And I'm really grateful that we all passed, because if one of us hadn't passed, I'd be telling a very different story. Especially if it had been me. So I had a cell phone, a smartphone, and I went online, and I just wrote, I passed. And a friend of mine who had moved from Southern California, where I had been living at the time, and he had been a member of our community down in Southern California, had moved to Toronto, Ontario, and was now on the board of the Center for Spiritual Living in Toronto. And he reached out that same day, seeing only that I had written the words, I passed. He said, congratulations. By the way, our minister resigned 2 weeks ago, and we need a new minister. I was at a point to make a decision. Am I ready or not? I decided to be ready. And so I wrote back, I said, great, consider me a candidate. And that was in July of 2011. And I went through a very, very fast candidating process, and I got in the car and drove to Toronto, Ontario in January of 2012 and took over as a senior minister at the Center for Spiritual Living in Toronto. And so that was having to make a decision in that moment. I am truly ready. I am truly ready. So ready is not a feeling you will ever achieve. It is a decision you make. It'll always be a decision you make. To go there, to go to the place of being ready takes a willing spirit. It takes a willingness to release relying on conditioned thinking. My conditioned thinking at that moment might have been, well, I don't know. I know you've put all the work in, but maybe it's not going to work out. Well, if I say maybe it's not going to work out, I'm creating my reality. And so all I have to do is make the decision that it's going to work out, even if it seems to go sideways. Because in the seeming, it is still working out, because everything is still in flow. It then becomes my responsibility to determine in the experience of things going sideways, what is possible for me now? But many of us treat this concept like we have to go to war with ourselves in a way. It's like, oh my gosh, I have to purge those thoughts that are not working for me, or I got to erase those feelings. I've got to exile those old patterns. And here I'm going to say, stop it. Stop making it so hard. Let that go. I could have gone into a great space of fear around leaving this country to go to another country to take over as the senior minister of a community. I could have gone into fear. And you know what? I did feel fear, but I did it anyway. I did it anyway. Now, here's the thing about those thoughts and those feelings and those old patterns. I want to acknowledge with honor that they served me at some point. And I will honor the fact that those things served me, even if they no longer serve me, because they helped me survive. And maybe that was just survival at the time. But allowing ourselves to step into thriving is what this philosophy is all about. So honor those old patterns, honor those old thoughts, honor those old feelings for what they are, which are one-time benefits, and now choose something new. One of the ways that we teach this philosophy is to acknowledge that we have a practice of denial. And we're not talking about psychological denial. We don't stick our head in the sand and say, these things are not happening. No, what we are saying is that irrespective of the things that are happening in our lives, those things do not have power over who we are. Those things don't have power. That's the denial. And so healing our lives is not rejecting the circumstances. Healing is allowing ourselves to mentally revise the circumstances based on a spiritual blueprint. And what is that blueprint? I can tell you what that blueprint is in one word. That blueprint is love. I heard somebody say consciousness. Same thing. But love. Love is the blueprint for all that flows forth from us, as us, because we are the embodiment and expression of pure love. So today, the call is to stop trying to purge the old and start editing with love as the primary point of view. We don't purge, we edit. And that is the activity of mind action. We use the law of cause and effect. We also call it the law of mind action. It is one law that is an invitation to edit the way we are thinking and the way we are experiencing our lives, because we are editing our inner relationship to the outer circumstances. And that is how we transform our lives. When things don't go as planned, the worst question we can ask is why? Why did that happen? Here's the question that I will invite you to ask when things don't go as planned. What am I remembering about myself right now? If something doesn't go as planned, articulate this question. What am I remembering about myself right now? That third aspect of our mission statement, remember who you are, is the invitation. That's what I am seeking to invite us all into, remembering that we are the divine power and presence. The wholeness of us is that. Eric Butterworth said God, and he's speaking in terms of the paradox here, he said, God is the transcendent whole of things of which you are an individualized part. But there is no aspect of you that is not wholly God. We can rely on that identity. I choose to rely on that identity. It took training my mind to do that. I didn't always do that, but I rely on that identity so that when the experience of circumstances, those limited expressions, when those experiences collapse, what I can be reminded of is this, that the larger intelligence of life itself has not collapsed, because it can never collapse, because it can never be depleted. The whole still moves, the whole still knows, the whole still includes us. Flow is easier when I stop thinking I have to manage the universe. Letting go is not quitting. Letting go is releasing the illusion that control equals power. Letting go is not surrender to defeat. Letting go is a surrender to wisdom. The breakthrough is not forcing the river, it is trusting the current. And so the invitation today is this: become so rooted in spirit that even if the plan changes, our inner spirit remains steadfast. We don't need to force life. Honor what has been and welcome what is becoming. Peace and blessings. You are magnificent. If you are new to our community, one of the things that I endeavor to do is to find practical tools that I can give to you that allow you to take the message of the day and put it to use in your life. And so I offer a life practice at the completion of every single message each Sunday. The life practice is this week. When things don't go as planned, and you know what? I'm going to let go of the if, because things don't go as planned in my life. I don't know, So when things don't go as planned, take a rest. And I love an acronym. Rest means this: recenter, edit, surrender, trust. And so recenter, I'm going to take a breath. I'm going to allow myself to come back to center. I'm going to edit, which means I'm going to change my mind. I see the circumstance that is unfolded. I'm not going to go into reactivity about that circumstance mentally. I'm going to say what is possible. That is how I'm going to begin to edit my mind. In articulating and understanding what is possible, I'm going to surrender and trust. That is the offer that I have for you today that you can carry with you into your life.